They thought my silence meant weakness. But what they didn't know was that silence could create pressure and one day explode. When they arrived with their suitcases, hoping for solace, they found a message instead. This house was built by my own hands. These walls hold my years, my memories, my sacrifices, and I will not let anyone take them from me. That lock on the door wasn't cruelty. It was a lifetime of patience and finally saying, enough. Before we begin, I'm curious. Where are you listening from? Funny how we can be miles apart and still meet in the same story, isn't it? The room is for my parents now. You can sleep in the living room, Martha. My room, I answered dryly. In my own house. Tanya crossed her arms. It's already decided. I already told them yes. You've always been so understanding. It won't be a problem. I took a deep breath. You offered my room without asking me. You made decisions about my life over the phone, and now you want to silence me by calling me understanding. James walked in trying to make peace that he never managed to create. Mama, don't get upset. It's temporary. They don't have anywhere else to go. It's temporary, my esteemed son, I replied. Since when did having an opinion in my own home become a drama? Tanya took a step toward me. If you don't like it, just accept it. I'll handle it. No, Tanya, you're not handling anything, I replied with a firm voice. Today I'm handling setting boundaries. The dish rag fell from my hand. I straightened my shoulders. Sit down, James. Sit down. Tanya. Y'all gonna listen, and you ain't gonna forget. It. What came out of my mouth from that moment on turned this house upside down. I turned 70 last week and never thought the day would come when my own daughter-in-law would tell me that my room no longer belonged to me in the house I built with my own sweat and tears. I was cleaning up the kitchen after lunch when I heard Tanya talking on the phone. With an excitement I hadn't seen from her in a long time, I pretended to be busy washing dishes, but every word she said made my heart tighter. Yes, Mama, y'all can bring everything. Martha won't mind. She's real cool about these things. Y'all can stay in her bedroom. She sleeps in the living room. I felt the air leave my chest. What you mean, her bedroom? It was my bedroom in my house, but I kept pretending I wasn't listening. Like I always do when I don't want to create problems in this family that I love so much. What hurt my heart the most was how naturally Tanya talked about my life. Like I was some kind of rag doll she could move from one place to another without asking me anything. Oh, Martha loves having company in the house. Y'all gonna see how happy she gets. Lies. Nobody ever asked me if I get happy. Nobody ever asks what Martha wants. Ever since my son got married, it seems like I became part of the furniture in this house that I built brick by brick when I was young. When Tanya hung up the phone, she came into the kitchen with a smile that looked forced. Martha, I got some great news. My parents are coming to stay with us for a few days. Ain't that wonderful? I looked at her, trying to process what had just happened. A few days. Over the phone she had talked like it was something permanent. And why didn't she consult me first? This has always been my house, even after they came to live here when they got married. But like always, I just smiled and said, Of course, baby girl. When they coming? Tanya seemed relieved with my automatic response like always. Tomorrow afternoon? Good thing you understand, Martha. You've always been so understanding. But what they didn't know was that everything was about to change. That night, I couldn't sleep a wink. I stayed awake, turning the whole situation over in my head. I couldn't understand how Tanya had the nerve to make a decision like that without even consulting me. I got up early and went to make coffee, trying to organize my thoughts. That's when James appeared in the kitchen, still in his pajamas, and said to me like it was nothing. Mama, you can sleep in the living room, right? It's just for a few days. A few days. Everybody kept saying a few days. But I know Tanya well, and I know that when she says a few days, it could be a few months or even longer. I remembered all the times I set aside my things to please this family. When they got married, I gave them half of my house. When little Grace was born, I converted my sewing room into a nursery for the baby. When Tanya wanted to remodel the kitchen, I agreed to lose my little corner where I had my plants. And now they wanted me to give up my own bedroom, my refuge, the only space that was still truly mine. I sat at the kitchen table with my coffee and a tear slipped out. Lord, I whispered softly, how long am I going to accept being treated like this in my own house? James didn't even notice my condition. He was busy checking his phone, probably working like always. Since he was little, my son was like that, very focused on his things, but kind of distracted when it came to other people's feelings. Tanya came into the kitchen all dressed up, smelling good, and announced to me, Martha, I'm going out to buy some things for when my parents arrive. Can you fix up your room? Thanks. And she left without even waiting for my answer. And in that moment, something inside me finally broke. The days before had been an emotional roller coaster. Tanya had been more attentive to me than usual, asking me how I felt, if I needed anything, if I wanted us to go to the grocery store together. At first, I thought she was finally trying to get closer to me, that maybe she had understood that I also had feelings and needs. How naive I was. Now I realized that all that kindness was because she already had planned to ask me to give up my bedroom. She had been softening me up so that when the moment came, I would say yes without protesting like I always have, like the good mother-in-law I've always tried to be. I remembered when James was little and he asked me why my mama always gave in to my daddy and everything. I told him that's how women were back then, that we learned to be accommodating, to not create problems, to maintain family peace at the cost of our own desires. I never thought I would be living that same situation in my own house, with my own family. I got up from the table and went to look at my bedroom, the photos of my late mother on the nightstand, the crucifix she gave me before she died, the quilt I embroidered myself during the long winters when James was a baby. All of that had history, had value, had my soul in it, and they wanted me to simply get out of there to make room for people who didn't even know me well. Tanya came back from the store loaded with bags. She brought everything, special food, flowers to decorate, even new towels for the bathroom. She looked excited, like a child at Christmas, but when she saw me standing in the doorway of my bedroom, her expression changed. Martha, did you start taking your things out? She asked me with that sweet but firm voice she uses when she wants to get something. Tanya, I said. We need to talk. Her face changed. I think for the first time in 2 years of living together, there was something in my tone of voice that she hadn't heard before. Talk about what, Martha? My parents arrive in a few hours. Exactly about that. About the fact that they arrive in a few hours and I didn't know anything until yesterday. Tanya dropped the grocery bags on the kitchen table and turned to look at me with that look she gets when she thinks someone is being ridiculous. Oh, Martha. But I told you yesterday and you said it was fine. You told me they were coming. You didn't ask me if they could come. You didn't consult me about whether I agreed to give up my bedroom. There's a big difference between informing and consulting, Tanya. I saw how she processed my words. I think she had never thought about that difference. For her, telling me things was enough. My opinion had never been important in the equation. Martha, don't be like that. They're my parents. Where else are they gonna sleep? In a hotel. At other relatives' houses. Anywhere that's not my bedroom that y'all decided on without consulting me. Tanya looked genuinely confused, as if I was speaking another language. But Martha, you've always been so understanding about these things. I thought there wouldn't be a problem. Of course there's no problem, Tanya. The problem isn't your parents. The problem is that you all make decisions about my life like I don't exist. At that moment, James arrived from work. He walked into the house whistling, like he always does when he's in a good mood, but he stopped dead when he saw our faces. What's going on here? He asked, looking at Tanya and then at me. Your mama doesn't want my parents to stay in her room, Tanya said, and I noticed how she changed the story. It was no longer that they had decided without consulting me. Now it was that I didn't want to help. Mama, James said with that tired voice he uses when he thinks I'm being difficult. It's just a few days. Can't you be flexible? Son, I answered him, I can be flexible. I've been flexible for 2 years. I've given up my space, my privacy, my routine, but this is too much. Too much? Esperanza raised her voice for the first time. Too much that my parents come to visit their daughter? Too much that we ask you for a small favor? It's not a small favor, Tanya. It's my bedroom, my refuge, the only place in this house that I still feel is mine. James looked at me like he didn't recognize me. Mama, the whole house is yours. We just live here. Really, son? When was the last time y'all consulted me before changing something in this house? When was the last time y'all took my opinion into account for any decision that affects my daily life? An uncomfortable silence fell because the answer was obvious. Never. Mama, don't be dramatic, James said. We're talking about a few days, that's all. And after that, what, son? After that, y'all gonna decide it's more convenient for me to go live somewhere else? Y'all gonna decide I'm too old to live alone? Y'all gonna decide for me when I should go to the doctor, what clothes to wear, what food to eat? Tanya and James looked at each other. I think they had never thought about those possibilities, but I could see them clear as day. Once you start giving up your autonomy, it becomes easier and easier for others to make decisions for you. Martha, I think you're exaggerating, Tanya said. We would never do that. Tanya, 2 days ago, I thought y'all would never make decisions about my bedroom without consulting me. And here we are. The doorbell rang at that moment. Tanya went pale. That must be my parents. I looked toward the door and then looked at them. For the first time in years, I had their full attention. For the first time in years, my opinion mattered because finally there were consequences if they didn't take it into account. Go answer it, I told them. I'm going to my bedroom, which is going to keep being my bedroom. Tanya looked desperate. Martha, please, what am I going to tell my parents? Tell them the truth, Tanya, that y'all didn't consult me before inviting them to stay in my bedroom, and that's why there's nowhere to put them up. James tried to mediate. Mama, we can work this out another way. Maybe they can sleep in the living room. Of course they can, I answered them. But that decision y'all have to make. I already made mine. The doorbell rang again, more insistently this time. Go on, I told them. Your guests are waiting. When they went to answer the door, I went to my bedroom and locked the door. I sat on my bed trembling, not from fear, but from an emotion I hadn't felt in years. Empowerment. I heard voices in the living room. Tanya explaining something with a nervous voice. James trying to calm the situation. Tanya's parents asking questions, and me, for the first time in 2 years, feeling like I had control over my own life. That night I didn't come out of my bedroom for dinner. I heard how they organized makeshift beds in the living room. I heard discussions in low voices. I heard Tanya crying, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel guilt about her tears. The next day, when I got up early like always, I found Tanya's parents having breakfast in my kitchen, Mrs. Parker and Mr. Parker, older folks like me who greeted me with forced cordiality. Good morning, Mrs. Johnson, Mr. Parker said to me. We hope there's no trouble because of our visit. I looked at them and felt genuine compassion for them. It wasn't their fault to be in this uncomfortable situation. Good morning, I answered them. There's no trouble. What there is a lack of communication that I hope gets resolved soon. Mrs. Parker looked at me with curiosity. She was an intelligent woman. She could see there was something more to this story than what they had been told. Tanya told us that you needed your bedroom last night, she said carefully. Tanya told you all right, I answered her. It's my bedroom in my house. I saw how they exchanged looks. I think they were starting to understand that their children hadn't told them the whole truth about the situation. Tanya came into the kitchen at that moment with swollen eyes from crying and an unfriendly face. Martha, can we talk in private? Sure, I told her. In my bedroom. I took her to my room and closed the door. Tanya looked desperate, defeated. Martha, my parents traveled all the way from Birmingham to be here. They can't just go back like that. They don't have to go back, Tanya. They can stay, but not in my bedroom. Then where? That's your problem to solve. You invited them without consulting me. Tanya sat on my bed without permission. Something that bothered me, but I decided to let it slide. I don't understand why you're being so difficult, Martha. Before, you never acted like this. Before, y'all had never disrespected me this way. Disrespected you? But we asked you for a favor, Tanya. Y'all didn't ask me anything. Y'all informed me. There's a very big difference. She stayed quiet for a moment, processing my words. And what do you want me to do now? I want you to understand that this is my house, and that my opinion matters. I want you to consult me next time you have plans that affect me before making decisions. And I want your parents to find a hotel, find another place, but not at the cost of my comfort and my space. Tanya got up from my bed with tears in her eyes. I can't believe you're being so selfish. Martha, that word, selfish, echoed in my head. 70 years of life putting myself second, and now I was selfish for defending my space. Tanya, I said with a calm that surprised me, being selfish would be asking you to leave my house. Defending my bedroom isn't selfishness, it's dignity. When she left my room slamming the door, I stayed alone with my thoughts. For the first time in years, I felt like the owner of my own life. And although I knew things were going to change in this house, I also knew it was time to show them that Martha Johnson wasn't the doormat they thought she was. The following days were tense, but I maintained my position. Tanya's parents stayed 3 days in the living room and then went to a hotel. Tanya spoke to me only when necessary. James tried to mediate, but I wasn't interested in negotiating anymore. A week later, Tanya finally approached me while I was watering my plants on the front porch. Martha, she said with a quiet voice, I want to apologize to you. I looked at her, waiting for her to continue. I didn't realize I was treating you badly. I thought since you never complained, you were okay with everything. Tanya, I said, not complaining doesn't mean being okay with everything. It means having manners and respect for family harmony. But that doesn't mean I don't have limits. I know. Can we start over? She asked me. I looked at her for a long moment. I could see she was sincere, but I also knew that habits take time to change. We can try, I told her. But with new rules. Tanya nodded quickly. The first rule is that any decision that affects me directly has to be discussed with me before it's made. Yes. Martha, the second rule is that my bedroom is my private space. I'm not giving it up again for any reason. Understood? Understood. And the third rule is that if something like this happens again, there won't be a discussion. I'll simply leave this house. Tanya's eyes went wide. I would leave without thinking twice, I answered her. This is my house, but I'd rather live in peace somewhere else than live like a burden in my own house. From that day on, things changed, not completely. Because habits of years don't change overnight, but noticeably. Tanya started asking my opinion before making decisions. James started realizing that his wife wasn't always right. And I started feeling like my voice mattered in my own house. But the most important thing I learned was that it's never too late to defend your dignity. At 70, I finally understood that being good doesn't mean being submissive, and that respect isn't asked for. It's demanded. I thought that after our conversation on the porch, things were really going to improve, but I realized that changing years of habits isn't as easy as saying, yes, Martha, and promising to be different. The first days after Tanya apologized to me were strange. She made a very obvious effort to ask me things, but you could tell it was hard work for her. It was like she had to remind herself every so often that I also had opinions that mattered. Martha, do you think it's okay if I change the living room curtains? Martha, what do you think if I invite my sister for Sunday dinner? Martha, do you agree if James and I go out Saturday night? At first I was glad she was consulting me, but then I started realizing she was doing it in a mechanical way, like it was another task on her daily to-do list. It wasn't genuine respect. It was fulfilling a requirement to avoid another conflict like the bedroom one. James, for his part, seemed relieved that everything had returned to normal. For him, the problem had been solved when Tanya and I made peace. He didn't understand that what had happened was much deeper than a simple argument about where his in-laws were going to sleep. One afternoon, while I was preparing lunch, I heard Tanya talking on the phone with one of her friends. I wasn't trying to eavesdrop, but the kitchen is next to the living room and her voice could be heard clearly. No, girl, she got over her tantrum, she was telling her friend. You know how older ladies are. Sometimes they get difficult over any little thing. But I already talked to her and everything's fine. Tantrum. She had called my defense of my basic rights as owner of my own house a tantrum. I felt like I had been slapped. At that moment, I understood that Tanya hadn't understood anything about what had happened. For her, I had thrown an old lady's fit that had passed after she managed me well. Oh yeah, you're right, she continued saying. Sometimes you gotta treat them like little children, with patience, until they forget what had them upset. I stood there by the stove with the wooden spoon in my hand, feeling my eyes fill with tears. Not tears of sadness, but of a rage I didn't know how to handle. That's how she saw me, like a little child who had to be managed with patience until I forgot why I was upset. Well, of course I'm not gonna tell her anything else about my parents coming to visit, Tanya continued. Next time they come, I'll just take them to a hotel from the beginning. Why make her mad for no reason? And there was the truth. She hadn't understood that the problem wasn't where her parents stayed. The problem was that she had made decisions about my life without consulting me. But for Tanya, the solution was simply to avoid the topic that had made me angry, not to change the way she treated me. That night, during dinner, I observed my family with different eyes. James talked about his work while Tanya nodded and made appropriate comments. Little Grace played with her food while telling stories about school. Everything looked normal, harmonious, like the perfect family we had always pretended to be. But I could no longer pretend I didn't see the reality. Tanya didn't respect me. She managed me. She tolerated me. She treated me like a piece of furniture that sometimes got difficult, but that with a little patience would behave well again. After dinner, while I was clearing the plates from the table, Tanya approached me with a smile. Martha, what do you think if tomorrow we go to the grocery store together? It's been a while since we went out, just the two of us. I looked at her, trying to figure out if it was a genuine invitation or part of her strategy to manage me. Why do you want us to go together? I asked her. Well, to spend time together, Martha. To talk. Like before. Like before? When before? When I used to go with her to the store and carry the bags while she chose everything without asking me what I wanted to eat? When I paid for things and she acted like she was doing me a favor by letting me come with her? No, thank you, I said. I prefer to go alone. I saw how her face changed. She wasn't used to me saying no to her invitations. Why, Martha? Are you still upset? I'm not upset, Tanya. I simply prefer to do my shopping alone. She stood there for a moment, like she didn't know what to do with my answer. Finally, she went to the living room without saying anything else. The next day, I got up early like always and went alone to the grocery store. Walking through the aisles without anyone telling me what to buy or what not to buy felt like a small freedom. I bought the vegetables I liked, not the ones Tanya liked. I bought fish instead of chicken because I felt like having fish. I bought flowers to decorate my bedroom because I hadn't had flowers just for me in a long time. When I got back to the house, Tanya was in the kitchen with an unfriendly face. Did you already go to the store? She asked me as if it wasn't obvious. Yes, I answered, starting to put away my purchases. And why didn't you wake me up? I told you I wanted to come with you. Because I don't need company to go to the store, Tanya. I've been going alone for 70 years. But I wanted to go with you. Why? The question threw her off. She stood quiet for a moment, like she had never thought about the answer. Well, to keep you company. I don't need you to keep me company out of obligation, Tanya. If you want to go to the store, go. But don't pretend it's to spend time with me when we both know it's not true. Tanya got offended. How do you mean I'm pretending? I really do want to spend time with you. Okay. And why did you never want to spend time with me before last week? She didn't know how to answer because the answer was obvious. She had never wanted to spend time with me. Now she wanted to do it because she had realized I could be difficult if she didn't keep me happy. If you're still here, leave a meaningful quote below. Let's see how many hearts felt this story. That afternoon, while While Tanya had gone out to pick up Grace from school, I started remembering how the first months had been when they came to live in my house. James had lost his job and they couldn't pay the rent on their apartment. Tanya was pregnant and they needed to save money. I opened the doors of my house to them without thinking twice, because that's what a mother does when her son needs her. At first, Tanya was kind to me, not affectionate, but polite. She thanked me when I cooked. She asked if I needed help with things around the house. She even bought me small gifts from time to time. But as the months passed and James got another job, things started to change. Tanya was no longer the grateful daughter-in-law who had come to my house asking for shelter. She started behaving like she was the lady of the house and I was a tenant who had to adapt to her rules. First it was small things. She changed the brand of detergent I used because she didn't like it. She moved my plants from where I had them because according to her they looked better somewhere else. She started deciding what we watched on TV during meals. When Grace was born, things got worse. Tanya became very territorial about everything related to the baby. She wouldn't let me hold her without supervision. She criticized the way I talked to her. She said my advice about baby care was outdated. But what hurt me most was seeing how James took his wife's side in everything. When I tried to talk to him about these changes, he told me that Tanya was the mother and had the right to decide how to take care of her daughter. When I told him, I felt like a stranger in my own house. He said it was my imagination, that Tanya loved me very much. Little by little, I gave up ground. I stopped giving opinions about Grace's upbringing. I stopped suggesting changes in the house. I stopped expressing my preferences about anything that could cause conflict. I became invisible in my own house. The lowest point came when Grace turned 2. Tanya organized a party without consulting me. She invited all her family and her friends. She hired a clown, bought decorations, prepared a complete menu. Everything in my house with my money. Because obviously I paid for everything, but without my opinion mattering at all. The day of the party, I felt like a domestic employee in my own house. Tanya gave me orders about where to put things, how to serve the food, what dishes to use. Her relatives treated me like I was the maid they had hired to help with the party. That night, after everyone left and I finished cleaning up the mess, I sat in my bedroom and cried. I cried for the strong woman I had been and had let fade away. I cried for the years I had lost trying to be the perfect mother-in-law. I cried for my son, who no longer saw me as his mother, but as an obstacle to his wife's happiness. But I didn't do anything to change the situation. I kept putting up with it, kept giving in, kept being invisible until last week when I finally said no. Now, remembering all of that, I realized that one conversation on the porch and some half-hearted apologies weren't going to change years of established dynamics. Tanya hadn't changed. She had only learned to be more careful to avoid me getting difficult again. That night, during dinner, Tanya casually mentioned that she had invited her sister Carmen for Sunday dinner. "Is that okay with you, Martha?" she added, remembering her promise to consult me. "Did you already invite her?" I asked. "Well, yes, but I told her I had to ask you first." There it was again. She hadn't consulted me before making the invitation. She was informing me after she had already made the decision and expecting me to say yes so she could look good. "And if I say no?" I asked. Tanya looked uncomfortable. "Well, I already told her yes. It would be weird to tell her now that she can't come." "Then you're not consulting me, Tanya. You're asking me to validate a decision you already made." James intervened. "Mama, it's just a family dinner. What's the problem?" "The problem, son, is that your wife promised to consult me before making decisions that affect me, but she keeps doing the same thing as always." "But I did ask you," Tanya protested. "You asked me after you had already invited your sister." "That's not consulting, that's informing." Tanya got defensive. "So what do you want? For me to ask permission for everything like I'm a child? I want you to understand the difference between consulting and informing. Consulting is asking me before making the decision. Informing is telling me what you already decided and expecting me to agree. Grace, who had been listening to the conversation without completely understanding what it was about, asked, "Why are y'all arguing?" "We're not arguing, sweetheart," I told her. "We're just talking about how to make decisions as a family." Tanya smiled at Grace. "Your grandma is being a little difficult, but she'll get over it." Those words hit me like a slap. After everything we had talked about, after her apologies, after her promises, she still saw my demand for respect as something I would get over. I got up from the table without finishing my food. "Where are you going?" James asked. "To my bedroom," I answered, "to think about whether I really want to keep living in a house where my opinion doesn't matter and where defending my rights is considered being difficult." I left them at the table and went to my room. I closed the door and sat on my bed, shaking with anger and sadness. An hour later, someone knocked on my door. It was James. "Mama, can you open up? We need to talk." I opened the door and let him in. He sat in the chair next to my dresser and looked at me with a worried face. "Mama, I think you're exaggerating things." "You think so, son?" "Yes, Tanya did ask you about Carmen. Maybe not in the perfect way you wanted, but she did ask." "James, do you understand the difference between consulting and informing?" He was quiet for a moment. "I think so." "Then explain it to me." "Well, consulting is asking you before doing something. Informing is telling you what was already done." "Exactly." "And what did your wife do?" James sighed. "She invited Carmen and then asked you." "So she informed me, she didn't consult me." "But Mama, these are small things." "Carmen is family. It's not like she invited strangers. Son, it's not about who comes to dinner. It's about your wife promising to change how she treats me and not doing it." "Mama, Rome wasn't built in a day. Let's give her time." "How much time, James? Another 2 years? 5 years? Until I die?" My son looked genuinely worried. "Mama, what is it you really want?" "I want to be treated with respect in my own house. I want my opinion to matter. I want to feel like I'm part of this family, not a burden y'all have to tolerate." "You're not a burden, Mama." "No? Then why does your wife talk about me like I'm a difficult little child who has to be managed with patience?" James looked confused. "When did she say that?" I told him about the phone conversation I'd overheard. I saw how his face changed as I related his wife's exact words. "Mama, I didn't know." "Of course you didn't know, son. Because your wife knows perfectly well how to behave when you're around, and how to behave when she's alone with me." James was quiet for a long time, processing what I had told him. "What do you want me to do?" he finally asked me. "I want you to tell your wife that either she learns to treat me with genuine respect, not fake respect, or I'm leaving this house." "Mama, you can't leave. This is your house." "Exactly, son. This is my house, and I'd rather leave my house than keep living like a burden in it." James left my bedroom with a very serious face. I heard voices in the living room, him and Tanya talking in low but tense voices. I couldn't hear the words, but the tone told me that finally my son was realizing this was more serious than he had thought. The next day, Tanya approached me while I was having breakfast. "Martha, James told me what you heard yesterday." I looked at her, waiting for her to continue. "I want to apologize. I shouldn't have talked about you like that." "No, Tanya, you shouldn't have thought about me like that. You're right. And you're also right about Carmen. I should have asked you before inviting her. And so? What are you going to do about it?" Tanya looked uncomfortable. "Well, do you want me to call Carmen to cancel?" "I don't want you to cancel anything, Tanya. I want you to understand why what you did was wrong and for it not to happen again." "Yes, I understand now. Really. I hope so, because this is the second time you tell me you understand, and the second time you go back to doing the same thing." Tanya turned red. "It's just that it's hard to change habits of years." "I know, but I also know that if you really wanted to change, you would make the effort." "I do want to change, Martha." "Then show me." Not with words, with actions. Tanya nodded and left the kitchen. But I no longer had much hope that things were going to change. I had really seen this movie before. The apologies. The promises, the few days of different behavior, and then the return to the same old thing. That afternoon, I made a decision I had been avoiding making for a long time. I went to my bedroom, took a small suitcase out of the closet, and started putting some basic things in it. Not much, just the essentials for a few days. Then I went to the phone and dialed my sister Aunt Laverne's number, who lives in New Orleans. "Sister," I said when she answered, "can you do me a really big favor?" "Of course, Martha. Tell me what you need. Can I stay with you for a few days? I need to get out of here." There was silence on the other side of the line. Laverne and I have always been very close, but since she moved to New Orleans after she got married, we only see each other on special occasions. "Did something serious happen, sister?" "Yes," I answered. "It's not an emergency, but I need time to think away from this house. It's because of Tanya." Laverne knew the situation well. During my visits to New Orleans, I had told her about the things that happened in my house, although I always tried not to complain too much. But my sister is very smart and knew how to read between the lines. "Come whenever you want, Martha. You know my house is your house." "Thank you, sister. I'll arrive tomorrow afternoon." When I hung up the phone, I felt a relief I hadn't experienced in years. Just knowing I had a place to go, that I wasn't trapped in this situation, gave me a feeling of freedom I had forgotten existed. I finished packing my small suitcase and hid it under my bed. I didn't want Tanya or James to realize my plans until I was ready to leave. That night, during dinner, I watched them like it was the last time I would see them. Grace told stories about school with the excitement typical of a 4-year-old. James talked about an important project at work. Tanya commented about plans for the weekend. Everything seemed normal, like a regular family having dinner together, but I no longer felt part of that normalcy. I felt like a spectator watching a play I no longer wanted to participate in. "Martha," Tanya said to me, "what do you think about going Saturday to little cousin Letitia's baby's baptism?" There it was again. She was consulting me, but by the way she said it, it was obvious she had already confirmed our attendance. "Did you already say we were going?" I asked. I told her we probably would, but that I had to ask you. "Tanya," I said with tiredness, "that's not consulting me. That's committing me and then asking me to validate your decision." "But I asked you. You asked me after you had already given an answer. Don't you see the difference?" James sighed. "Mama, again, with the same thing. Yes, son, again with the same thing, because your wife keeps doing the same thing." Tanya looked frustrated. "I don't know what else you want me to do, Martha. I did ask you. I want the next time someone invites you to something that includes me, you tell them you need to check with me before giving an answer. Then you ask me if I want to go, and only then do you confirm. And if you say no, what am I going to tell them? You're going to tell them the truth, that your mother-in-law didn't want to go. But they're going to think it's weird. And what's weird about a 70-year-old person not wanting to go to a party?" Tanya didn't have an answer for that because there wasn't one. What was happening was that she didn't want to look bad with her family for having a mother-in-law who wasn't totally submissive. "Okay," she finally said. "Next time I'll do what you say." But I didn't believe her anymore. I had heard that promise too many times. The next day I got up early like always, but this time with a different purpose. I prepared breakfast for the family, left food ready for lunch, and cleaned the house like I did every day. But I knew it was the last time I would do it for a while. When James left for work and Tanya took Grace to school, I took my suitcase out from under the bed and put it by the door of my bedroom. Then I sat at my desk and wrote a letter. My hands were shaking, not from nerves, but from the excitement of finally taking control of my life. "Dear James and Tanya," I wrote, "when y'all read this letter, I won't be in the house anymore. Don't worry about me, I'm fine and safe. I simply need time to think away from here. During the last years, I have tried to be the perfect mother-in-law and mother, always pleasing, always giving in, always putting family harmony above my own feelings. but I can't keep doing it anymore. Tanya, I know you promised me you would change, but promises without actions don't mean anything. You've had multiple opportunities to show that you really respect me, and every time you go back to doing the same thing. James, you are my son and I love you more than my life. But I can't keep waiting for you to realize what's happening in your own house. Your wife doesn't respect me, and you allow that to keep happening. I don't know when I'm going to come back or if I'm going to come back. That's going to depend on whether y'all really understand what's been wrong and are willing to change. This is my house, but I'd rather be away from my house than keep feeling like a stranger in it. With love, but also with sadness, Martha. I folded the letter and put it in an envelope with their names. I left it on the kitchen table where they would surely see it when they came back. I took my suitcase and left the house that had been my home for more than 30 years. I walked to the corner where I caught a taxi to the bus station. Where are we going, ma'am? The taxi driver asked me. To the bus station, I answered. I'm going to New Orleans. During the taxi ride, I felt a mix of emotions I didn't know how to handle. Sadness for leaving my house and my family, fear of the unknown, but above all, a feeling of freedom I hadn't felt in years. At the terminal, I bought my ticket for the 2 p.m. bus. I had time, so I sat in the waiting area and watched the people passing by. Families saying goodbye, people traveling for work, young people with big backpacks who looked excited about their adventures. I wondered when was the last time I had done something just because I wanted to do it, without having to ask permission or consult with someone else. I couldn't remember. The trip to New Orleans took 6 hours. During the whole journey, I looked out the window watching the scenery change. I left behind the familiar places of my city and headed toward something new. At 70, I was having my first adventure in decades. Laverne was waiting for me at the New Orleans terminal with a huge smile and open arms. "Sister," she said, hugging me tight, "I'm so glad you came." "Thank you for receiving me without asking questions," I answered. "Questions can wait. First, let's go home, you rest, eat something, and then we'll talk about whatever you want to talk about." Laverne's house is small but cozy. She's lived alone since she was widowed 5 years ago, and she's turned her home into a refuge full of plants, books, and beautiful memories. She set me up in the guest room that has a window overlooking a little garden full of flowers. "You know what?" she told me while helping me unpack. "It's been years since I had company in this house. This is going to do me a lot of good." That first night we talked until very late. I told her everything that had happened in recent years without leaving out any detail. Laverne listened to me without interrupting, nodding from time to time, sighing at the appropriate moments. "Sister," she said when I finished my story, "why did you put up with it for so long?" "Because I thought it was what I had to do. Because I thought if I changed, if I adapted, if I gave in enough, things were going to get better." "And did they get better?" "No, they got worse because the more I gave in, the more they expected me to give." Laverne nodded. "You know what your mistake was?" "What?" "You confused being good with being foolish." Her words hit me like a lightning bolt of clarity. She was right. I had confused kindness with submission, love with compliance, family harmony with personal sacrifice. "And now, what am I going to do?" I asked her. "Now you're going to rest, think. Remember who you were before you became the perfect mother-in-law. And then you're going to decide what you want to do with the rest of your life." The first days at Laverne's house were strange. I woke up early out of habit, but I didn't have to run to prepare breakfast for anyone. I didn't have to clean the house. I didn't have to plan meals. I didn't have to be aware of other people's needs. At first I felt guilty for not doing anything productive. But Laverne helped me understand that resting was also productive, that taking care of myself was also important. "Martha," she said to me one morning while we were having breakfast peacefully in her garden, "when was the last time you did something just because you liked it?" I thought about her question for a long time. "I don't remember," I finally answered. "What did you like to do before you got married?" "I liked to read. I liked to sew. I liked to walk in the park. I liked to go to the movies." And why did you stop doing those things? Because I didn't have time. Because I had to take care of James, then take care of the house, then take care of Tanya and Grace. And who took care of you? Another question I didn't have an answer for. Nobody took care of me. I was the one who took care of everyone else. Sister, Laverne said, taking my hand, you're 70 years old. If you live to 90, you have 20 years of life left. Are you going to spend them taking care of people who don't value you? Or are you going to spend them living for yourself? That question haunted me for days, 20 years. It was a lot of time to waste, but it was also a lot of time to start over. Meanwhile, my phone wouldn't stop ringing. James called me several times a day. First angry, then worried, then begging. Tanya had also called me crying, asking for forgiveness, promising that things were going to be different. But I wasn't ready for those conversations. Every time the phone rang, I let it ring. Laverne understood and never pressured me to answer. When you're ready, she told me, you're going to know what you want to do. A week after arriving in New Orleans, I finally answered one of James's calls. Mama, thank God. We were so worried. Where are you? I'm fine, son. I'm with Laverne. Why did you leave like that? Why didn't you tell us anything? Because if I had told y'all, you would have convinced me to stay, and I needed to leave. Mama, come back home. We're gonna talk. We're gonna fix things. What things are y'all gonna fix, James? Well, everything that has you upset. I'm not upset, son. I'm tired of not being respected in my own house. Mama, Tanya already understood. She's very sorry. How many times have you told me that already? James was quiet because he knew I was right. Tanya isn't sorry about the way she's treated me. She's sorry about the consequences of treating me badly. What's the difference? The difference is that a person who's truly sorry changes their behavior. A person who only regrets the consequences tries to convince you to come back so they can keep doing the same thing. James didn't know what to answer to that. Mama, when are you coming back? I don't know, son. Maybe never. You can't say that. It's your house, it's your family. Exactly. It's my house, and I have the right to decide if I want to live in it or not. And what's gonna happen to us? Y'all are gonna learn to live without me solving all your problems. Y'all are gonna learn to value what you had when you had it. After that conversation, the calls became less frequent. I think James finally understood that I wasn't gonna come back just because he asked me to. 2 more weeks passed. I had gotten used to the peaceful routine of Laverne's house. I got up when I wanted, had breakfast calmly, read books I had wanted to read for years, walked through the nearby park, helped Laverne with things around the house, but only because I wanted to, not because it was my obligation. For the first time in decades, I felt like a complete person, not like an extension of other people's needs. One afternoon, while I was watering the plants in Laverne's garden, my sister approached me with a serious face. Martha, I have to tell you something. What's wrong? James called me. Not you. Me. I stood still with the watering can in my hand. What did he tell you? He asked me to convince you to come back. He told me Tanya is doing very badly, that Grace asks for you every day, that he doesn't know what to do. And what did you tell him? I told him I wasn't going to convince you of anything. That you were an adult woman capable of making your own decisions? Thank you. But I also told him something else. What? I told him that if he really wanted you to come back, he had to do something more than ask for forgiveness. He had to show with actions that things were going to be different. And what did he say? He asked me what kind of actions. I told him he had to figure that out himself. That night I couldn't sleep well. For the first time since I had left, I started feeling the absence of my house, my bedroom, my things. I also started feeling Grace's absence. My granddaughter wasn't to blame for the problems between the adults, and I missed her terribly. But I knew I couldn't go back just because of nostalgia. If I went back, it had to be because things were really going to change. The next day, Laverne and I went downtown New Orleans to walk. While we were having coffee at a cafe overlooking the cathedral, my sister asked me a question that changed my perspective. Martha, do you want to go back to your house? Yes, I answered without hesitation, but I don't want to go back to the same situation. And if things don't change? And if Tanya goes back to doing the same thing after a few months? Then I leave again, but this time forever. Laverne smiled. That's the right attitude. Now you're not the Martha who puts up with everything. Now you're the Martha who has options. She was right. The simple fact of knowing I could leave whenever I wanted gave me a power I had never had before. That night, I decided to call James. Mama, I'm so glad you're calling. Son, I've been thinking about everything that's happened. Have you decided when you're coming back? Maybe I'll come back, James, but with conditions. What kind of conditions? First, I want Tanya to write me a letter. Not a text message, not a phone call. A handwritten letter where she explains to me exactly what she did wrong and how she plans to change. Okay, that can be done. Second, I want y'all to find your own house. There was a long silence on the other side of the line. Mama, did you hear what I said? Yes, but why? Don't you want us in your house anymore? I love y'all, son, but I don't want to live with y'all anymore. I've discovered that I like living alone, making my own decisions, having my space. But Mama, financially it's going to be very difficult. Son, that's not my problem anymore. Y'all are adults, y'all have jobs, y'all can solve your own financial problems. And if we don't find a house quickly, then y'all are going to have to stay where you are while you look. But I'm not coming back until y'all have concrete plans to leave. Mama, that's not fair. You know what's not fair, James? That for 2 years your wife treated me like a free domestic employee in my own house. That you allowed that to happen. That y'all made me feel like a stranger in the place I built. Mama, no, son. I've already made my decision. Either y'all accept my conditions or I stay here in New Orleans and find my own house here. Would you really do that? In a heartbeat, I answered, and for the first time in my life I meant it completely. After hanging up, I felt strangely calm. For the first time in years, I had control of the situation. For the first time in years, my decisions mattered. Laverne hugged me. I'm proud of you, sister. Do you think I'm doing the right thing? I think you're doing what you should have done years ago. And I think no matter what happens, you already won. Why? Because you're no longer the same woman who left her house 3 weeks ago. Now you're a woman who knows what she's worth and isn't willing to accept less. She was right. No matter what happened next, I had already won. I had recovered my dignity, my voice, my power to decide. And for the first time in years, that was enough. Thanks for staying with me until the end. I've left 2 more stories on the screen. Which one's calling your name?